She was 24 years old, successful, independent, and building the life she had always dreamed of. Jennifer Kesse did everything right. She worked hard, bought her own condo, and never missed a chance to check in with the people she loved. Yet one ordinary Tuesday morning in January 2006, she left for work and vanished without a trace. And somewhere out there, the person who took her is still living free. This is Famous Cold Cases, and today's story is the haunting unsolved disappearance of Jennifer Kesse. Jennifer Joyce Kesse was born on May 20th, 1981, and grew up in a loving family with her parents Drew and Joyce, and her younger brother Logan. From an early age, she was driven. She wasn't content to just dream about success. She worked for it. Jennifer was a rising star. By 24, she was a project manager in finance, earning multiple promotions in her first year. She wasn't just dreaming of success, she was building it, buying her own condo in the Mosaic at Millenia complex in Orlando, a gated, modern community that felt safe and secure. And that condo became her sanctuary, the physical proof of everything she had worked so hard to achieve. Jennifer wasn't all work. She was close to her family, spoke to them almost every day. And she was deeply invested in a long-distance relationship with her boyfriend, Rob Allen, who lived about 3 hours away in Fort Lauderdale. They met in January 2005 in Orlando, felt an instant connection, and despite the distance, they made it work with daily calls, long drives, and weekend visits. In January 2006, they finally took a real vacation together to St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands, a rare chance to be a normal couple without highways and countdowns between them. On Sunday, January 22nd, they flew back, landed in Miami, and Jennifer spent that night at Rob's place in Fort Lauderdale before driving back to Orlando for work early Monday morning. Monday, January 23rd, 2006, looked completely normal from the outside. Jennifer worked a full day, left the office around 6 p.m., and drove home to her condo in Orlando. Once home, she called her parents Drew and Joyce to tell them about St. Croix, the beaches, the food, the time with Rob, and they were happy to hear their daughter sounding so full of life. She also checked in with her younger brother Logan, who had stayed at her condo with friends over the weekend while she was away, making sure everything had gone smoothly and nothing was damaged. Around 10 o'clock that night, Jennifer called Rob. The conversation, according to him, wasn't a shouting match, but it was tense. Coming back from a perfect trip made the long distance feel heavier than usual. She was feeling vulnerable and needed reassurance that all of the sacrifices, long drives, weekends apart, were actually leading somewhere. It was the kind of raw, honest moment that happens in many long-distance relationships, where you need your partner to remind you that it's worth it. Rob reassured her. They talked it through, and the call ended at about 10 p.m., and that was the last time anyone ever spoke to Jennifer Kesse. Somewhere in that same window, while she was on the phone with family, there was a knock at Jennifer's front door. She wasn't expecting anyone, and she didn't answer. To this day, nobody knows who was on the other side. That unknown knock would later become one of the most disturbing details in this entire case. Tuesday morning, January 24th, started like any other for Drew and Joyce in Tampa until around 11 a.m. when the phone rang. It was someone from Jennifer's workplace, and it wasn't a social call. Her boss sounded worried and asked if they were Jennifer's parents, then told them Jennifer hadn't shown up for work and hadn't called in. For most people, that might sound like an inconvenience, but Jennifer missing work, especially without calling, was completely out of character. She was reliable, loved her job, and had an important meeting that morning, the kind of meeting she would never just skip. Drew and Joyce started calling her cell phone over and over, but every call went straight to voicemail. Joyce later said that Jennifer had had the phone since she was 16, and it had never gone straight to voicemail before. That was the moment she knew something horrendous had happened. Desperate for answers, they called the management office at her condo complex and asked for a welfare check. Staff did a visual inspection from outside. Everything looked normal. The door was closed and locked, and there were no signs of forced entry. But Jennifer's black Chevy Malibu wasn't in its usual spot. Drew, Joyce, and Logan immediately got in their car and started the drive from Tampa to Orlando, calling every hospital along the way to ask about Jennifer or any unidentified Jane Does, and every call came back empty. No Jennifer. No unknown patient that could be her. When they finally arrived at her condo and got inside, they didn't walk into a bloody crime scene, but nothing felt right. The condo looked relatively tidy, but there were tiny, chilling details everywhere. In the bathroom, water droplets still clung to the shower walls, and the shampoo and conditioner bottles sat in little puddles like they had just been used, while a damp towel lay on the dryer. Her hair dryer and makeup were spread out on the counter, as if she had been getting ready in a hurry, and a t-shirt lay on the floor near the shower, likely the one she'd worn to bed. In the bedroom, the bed was unmade, with clothes laid out on top, as if she'd been choosing an outfit for work. Joyce remembered Jennifer telling her about a new pair of 9 West alligator skin pumps she was excited to wear to the office, but those shoes were nowhere to be found in the condo. Her purse, car keys, and cell phone were gone, and her car was gone too, which suggested she had finished getting ready, left for work like any other morning, and never made it. The picture that emerged was of a woman who had showered, dressed, and walked out of her door, only to be intercepted in the short distance between her condo and her parking spot. From inside Jennifer's condo, the family called the Orlando Police Department to report her missing and explain everything they had found. No show at work, silent phone, missing car, and a condo that looked like she had left for the day. An officer came to the scene, looked around for roughly half a minute, and then delivered a devastating brush-off. She probably had a fight with her boyfriend and would be back. Then he left. Because of a stereotype that young women are dramatic, the critical first 48 hours, when evidence is fresh and trails are warm, were wasted. Jennifer's family knew she hadn't run away. Her suitcase from St. Croix was still half unpacked on the bedroom floor, and nothing was missing that would indicate she had taken off voluntarily. But by the time police took the situation seriously, the trail was already going cold. For 2 days, virtually nothing meaningful happened from law enforcement's side. In those same 2 days, Jennifer's family turned the condo into a command center, friends and relatives going in and out, making calls, stapling flyers, and trying to do the job they believed police should have been doing from the start. Later, when the case finally got attention, detectives would insist that processing the condo was pointless because it had been contaminated, while the family pointed out that if officers had taken them seriously immediately, there would have been no need for a command center at all. On the third day, something happened that forced the investigation into motion. Jennifer's black Chevy Malibu was found abandoned at Huntington on the Green, an apartment complex just over a mile from her condo. The car wasn't hidden. It was parked near the pool, out in the open. Inside, there was no sign of Jennifer, no purse, no phone, and, according to investigators, it looked like the car had been wiped down to remove evidence. There was one advantage. Huntington on the Green had working security cameras. Footage showed Jennifer's car pulling into the lot around noon on January 24th, the day she disappeared, and parking near the pool. A single person got out of the driver's seat. One person, not two, and walked calmly away from the vehicle. It wasn't Jennifer. The surveillance video was infuriatingly bad. One angle was so far away that the figure looked like a white blur, and the closer angle skipped every few seconds. Every time the person's face lined up with the camera, it was blocked by a fence post. Even so, investigators were able to estimate that the figure was between 5'3" and 5'5", with an appearance some people read as male, though the FBI later said the footage wasn't clear enough to definitively identify gender. The outfit has been endlessly debated. Some say it looks like a construction uniform, others like a security guard's clothes, and some see just a plain shirt and pants. But the most notable features were the person's hairstyle, body type, and what investigators described as unusually large feet for their height. They even contacted hair salons asking them to watch for anyone drastically changing their hairstyle from what appeared in the footage. Once the tape was released to media, tips poured in. Over the course of the investigation, more than 14,000 tips would be logged. A scent dog tracked from Jennifer's abandoned car back to her condo complex, further supporting the theory that whoever drove her car to Huntington on the Green had likely come directly from her home. At this point, the window of Jennifer's disappearance looked incredibly small. She likely went to bed after the call with Rob, woke up Tuesday morning, showered, got dressed, and left for work sometime between about 7:30 and 8 a.m., and something happened in that tiny space between her front door and her car. Some people have asked whether a clever perpetrator could have staged the condo to make it look like Jennifer had gotten ready for work, but her family insists the details, the damp towel, the bed, the missing new pumps she had mentioned to her mother, were too authentic to have been arranged by someone who didn't know her intimately. Jennifer's condo was never properly treated as a crime scene. By the time law enforcement was ready to process it, family and volunteers had been in and out for days. And Logan and his friends had recently stayed there, meaning the space was full of their fingerprints and DNA. Setting that aside, most people involved in the case now believe Jennifer was likely abducted at her car, either grabbed from behind while unlocking the door or confronted as she approached it. The obvious question is, who would do this? The first person to look at was Rob Allen, Jennifer's boyfriend, which is standard in any disappearance like this. He had a solid alibi. He was at work in Fort Lauderdale, 3 hours away, when Jennifer vanished and co-workers confirmed his presence. The relationship had its stresses, like their tense conversation the night before, but there were no signs of violence, and Rob drove to Orlando immediately after learning she was missing, cooperated fully, and never raised red flags for investigators. Rob was ruled out as a suspect. Then there was Matt, an ex-boyfriend who, according to some of Jennifer's loved ones, still wanted to reunite with her. The night before she disappeared, Matt was at Blue Martini, a bar located directly across the street from Jennifer's condo complex, which is a detail that has bothered people ever since. He told investigators he went to work the next morning and reportedly had an alibi, and police ultimately dropped him as a person of interest, implying that his story checked out. But his presence at a bar right across from Jennifer's home remains a strange and unsettling footnote. One of the most disturbing figures in the narrative is Johnny Campos, a supervisor at Jennifer's workplace who was married but allegedly fixated on her. According to her father, Jennifer had complained that Johnny repeatedly hit on her at work, and she tried to reject him politely to avoid tension or risking her position. Co-workers recalled him ranting that she had gone on vacation with Rob, and on the last day she was seen, some said they heard a tense exchange where he challenged her about the trip, and she replied that she had had the best time. On the day she disappeared, Johnny reportedly came to work late, claimed he'd gotten a ticket, and acted panicked and on edge. And a few days later, when her disappearance was still dominating conversation in the office, he allegedly told a coworker, "She's likely eaten up by alligators already." Despite these deeply unsettling details, investigators have publicly stated that Campos is not a person of interest. It is worth noting that polygraphs, used later with other people in this case, are notoriously unreliable and inadmissible in court. Yet, in this investigation, they appear to have been a major factor in clearing or dismissing potential suspects. The most widely discussed theory centers on the construction workers at Jennifer's condo complex. Mosaic at Millenia was still under construction in several areas, and workers were allowed to live in vacant units on site. Jennifer told her parents multiple times that some of these men would catcall her and stare when she walked by, which made her feel unsafe in her own home. And these workers had plenty of opportunity to learn her routine and see that she lived alone. The unknown knock on her door the night before she vanished becomes even more terrifying in that context. Someone could have been watching, checking, or testing her reactions. Although it was a gated community, the gate wasn't an impenetrable barrier. People could buzz in, follow another car through, or climb the fence if they were determined. Over time, the prevailing theory among investigators and the family became that Jennifer's abductor was likely someone with regular access to the complex, a resident, a worker, or a frequent visitor who knew the layout and her habits. Shockingly, it took 6 months for the lead investigator to even theorize that she had been abducted at her car, and 3 full years before construction workers were examined seriously as a focus of the case. During a later review of the investigation, a former housekeeper who had worked at the complex watched the surveillance footage of the unknown figure and thought the person resembled a man she knew, a maintenance worker called Chino. She said the walk, hair, and clothing looked like him. Police learned that Chino had lived in the same complex and had been inside Jennifer's condo once for maintenance, and when they tracked him down in prison, he admitted remembering her but denied any involvement. He agreed to take a polygraph and reportedly passed, and what looked like a promising lead went nowhere. By 2010, the lead detective was reassigned and the case remained stagnant. In 2016, 10 years after Jennifer disappeared, she was legally declared dead, a formal acknowledgement of what most people already feared, but a devastating milestone for her family. Jennifer should have been in her mid-30s, potentially married, with a growing career, maybe a family of her own. Instead, her life stopped at 24. Legally, Jennifer was dead, but for her family, the fight was just beginning. Frustrated by what they saw as a mishandled investigation and unanswered questions, Drew and Joyce hired private investigator Michael Toretta, who vowed to rebuild the case one puzzle piece at a time. He focused heavily on the construction workers, tracking down 6 other women who had lived at the complex when Jennifer did, and every one of them described similar experiences of catcalling and uncomfortable interactions with certain workers. But Toretta didn't know who the police had already interviewed or cleared because he didn't have access to the official files. In 2018, the Kesses did something extraordinary. They sued the city of Orlando and the Orlando Police Department, not for money, but for access to Jennifer's case files. After a long legal battle, they reached a settlement and were granted access. But even then, the city charged them around $18,000 just to copy roughly 15,000 pages of documents, and the family paid it, desperate for answers. When they opened those boxes, they finally saw what had been hidden for so long: massive gaps and questionable decisions in the investigation. One of the most chilling discoveries involved the car that police had once written off as wiped clean and unhelpful. Photographs from the day Jennifer's Malibu was found showed a hood coated in normal road dust and grime, but with large smudge marks on the right side, like someone's body had been slammed down onto it, and near the bottom were marks that looked like drag lines and fingers scraping across the metal. That evidence suggests a far more violent struggle at the car than originally acknowledged, supporting a scenario where Jennifer was ambushed near her vehicle, fought back, and was overpowered. The family was never told about these marks. They discovered them in the files themselves. After releasing the photos, they received new tips, including one from a woman who recalled seeing what she believed was Jennifer's car swerving in traffic, with 2 people in the front seat apparently fighting over the steering wheel near an exit close to Jennifer's home. Another tip described someone throwing a rolled-up carpet into a nearby lake about 10 months after Jennifer disappeared, which was especially ominous because construction crews at her complex had been scheduled to lay carpet in units on the day she vanished. Dive teams searched the lake for 2 days, but found no carpet, no rug, and no trace of Jennifer. Michael Toretta has since said he believes that up to 10 construction workers lived in the unit directly across from Jennifer's condo at the time she disappeared. His working theory is that several people know much more than they've ever admitted, and that 1 or 2 individuals may have carried out the abduction and likely murder, while the others stayed silent. Under that theory, one person would have driven Jennifer's car to Huntington on the Green, while another followed in a second vehicle to pick them up, which would explain why only a single figure appears on the surveillance footage. In 2022, after years of pushing, Drew and Joyce succeeded in getting the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to take over Jennifer's case from the Orlando Police Department, bringing in a new team and new resources. The FDLE began re-examining evidence and leads, offering a level of seriousness and focus that the family felt had been missing for years, though progress still seemed slow, and the case slipped back into cold status in the public eye. Later, the family reported hearing from FDLE agents that Jennifer's case was no longer considered cold and that new work had opened up investigative avenues, including mention of DNA found in existing evidence that had never been tested before, and a narrowed list of people of interest. Updates shared by the family emphasized renewed hope and energy from the investigative team, while also noting that they had been through many cycles of optimism and disappointment and were trying not to interfere with active work by pushing too hard publicly. They have also shared that a documentary series project is in development, which could bring another wave of attention and potential leads to Jennifer's case. Almost 20 years have passed, but cases older than Jennifer's have been solved through advances in DNA technology, and her case remains absolutely solvable. If untested DNA exists and leads to a match, it could finally unlock the truth of what happened between her front door and that short walk to her car. In interviews, Joyce has described 2 decades of sleepless nights, constant mental strain, and a life lived in painful limbo between hope and despair, saying her body is hurt for 20 years and that she had to decide whether to be crushed by this or to fight it, and she and Drew chose to fight. They have spent their savings, battled institutions, and devoted their lives to finding out what happened to their daughter, and they are still standing. They deserve answers, and Jennifer deserves justice. If you have stayed with this story this long, it says something about who you are. You care about people you have never met, and you believe justice still matters even when the world moves on. If you are still here, let us know in the comments. Share something like, "I'm still with Jennifer," and feel free to tell us where you are watching from. Your voice helps keep this investigation alive, and it means more than you know. Jennifer's case has become one of the most puzzling unsolved disappearances in Florida, standing at the intersection of technology, human error, and the capacity for both care and cruelty. It has drawn in experts, internet sleuths, and casual viewers who stumbled onto her story and couldn't look away. There is still a substantial reward for information leading to an arrest, and investigators believe that somewhere, someone holds a piece of information that could finally break this case open. It might be recognition of the person in that surveillance footage, a memory of someone with unusually large feet and that specific walk, or something about a person's disturbing interest in Jennifer's schedule, or a worker who lived at her complex back then. If you have watched or listened to this entire story, you have already chosen to care. You've chosen to spend your time honoring a woman you never met by learning what happened to her and refusing to look away. And that matters more than you know, because attention is pressure, and pressure can lead to truth. So here is the request. If you believe Jennifer's story deserves an ending, don't let this be the last time you think about her. Talk about her case. Share this video with someone who cares about justice. And if you have any information, no matter how small, contact the Florida Department of Law Enforcement or Central Florida Crime Line at 800-423-TIPS. Someone watching this knows something. That person could be you, and one call, one message, one tip could change everything for her family. Thank you for walking through this painful journey with us. Your time, your empathy, and your willingness to stand with victims and their families are what keep channels like this alive and give cold cases a real chance at finally being solved. If you felt connected to Jennifer's story, please subscribe to famous cold cases like this video and turn on notifications so you don't miss future episodes. Every new subscriber is another voice saying, "We remember and we will not give up."